The dining room was beginning to empty when I left grandmother and Judith at their table. They apparently had things to discuss on their own, so I strolled over to where Anna was sitting. "Hello," she said, and moved a little on the couch to make room for me. Her company, a thin man with greying hair and brown eyes, I now recognized from the post office next to the city hall. I sat down and introduced myself to him, and we shook hands. Anna looked very good in a simple black sleeveless dress with her curly red hair loose over her shoulders. "How are you, my friend?" she asked, and put her hand on mine. Her companion froze just a little bit, but seemed intent on not showing it. "I haven't seen you in ages. What do you do in that big house of yours?" "Apparently I sit by a window and write," I said. "Do you now?" She forked around a little with her dessert. "So how about that storm, eh?" "I don't understand why people go on about it. They happen all the time," Anna's companion said, and took a piece of her lemon tart. She ignored him. "I hear the storm was the worst in decades. Part of the roof of the cathedral has been destroyed, and Mrs. Miller says her cat got blown off the porch. Just whoosh! I haven't found it." Both Anna and I laughed at this, and I saw her companion giving us a strange look. He had probably never met the cat, a thin old creature called Maxie that had become very vicious over the years and kept hissing at the guests whenever it managed to follow Mrs. Miller to work. She probably hadn't even looked for it. Anna's companion asked for the bill and paid. "Come see me tomorrow at the bank," she whispered, while he was busy with the waiter. "I have something I want to show you." We all stood up to leave. Anna's companion said, just a little too loudly, "Let me walk you home." "Yes, Eric, you can walk me home," she answered, and gave me a quick smile. We parted, and I watched them walk over to the stairs. "Give my love to your sister," Anna called back to me. The restaurant was always empty now. Outside the windows, the lighthouse was sweeping its beam across the dark water. Only two guests were left, the theatre director and the bishop, sitting on opposite sides of the room. Both looked like they had dined on their own, and I guessed they were waiting for the other to leave first. It was publicly known that they did not like each other. The current bishop and his bishop father before him had always disapproved of the placement of the theatre on the main square, right in front of the church, even though it was built long before their family arrived in town. Whether it was for moral reasons or because they just didn't appreciate the competition, I didn't know. The theatre director hadn't exactly eased the tension when he, shortly after his arrival, had commissioned a little stone devil to be placed high up on the facade above the theatre entrance, smiling wickedly over the square. People quickly nicknamed the devil after the current bishop's estranged brother, a handsome hustler who left town a long time ago. The bishop made eye contact with me and nodded, so I walked over. Someone had given him quite a bad haircut, and I felt sorry for him. He had a glass of schnapps in front of him that looked like it had just been refilled. "I'm sorry about the roof," I said. "Yes, it's a mess. Water has been leaking in from all the rain, and some very nice old wall paintings have been partly destroyed." "That storm was a work of the devil," he mumbled, and stared over at the theatre director who was getting up to leave. "I hear his sister's coming home." Somehow everyone seems to know that except me. "Promise me you'll take good care of her," he said, with a long look over his glasses, and emptied his schnapps. We said goodbye, and on my way out I stopped by Henry, who looked worried. "Your grandmother asked me to say that you should come by her house tomorrow evening. She looked serious. Are you in trouble?" "No, or I don't think so." I nodded to Mrs. Miller, who was tidying up the bar, and she nodded back. I think most people had always found her somewhat scary, but I had never understood why. Maybe it was the way she always looked at you when you spoke, like she was trying to find the meaning behind your words. Or maybe that she never laughed to be polite, or just to lighten up a conversation like most of us do. She laughed when she found something funny, and often when no joke was intended. Maybe that was the scary part. When I came down the stairs, the man in the coat check was not there. There was only one coat left, so I put my token on the counter, slipped into the unlit cloakroom, and picked it up. Returning out into the lobby, I saw that it wasn't mine. I considered putting it back, but the thought of walking home without a coat wasn't very appealing, so I tried it on. The coat, a more expensive one than mine, was a little too big for me, but it felt warm. I walked out of the large black doors, the unfamiliar coat wrapped tightly around me. The wind was picking up again and it was suddenly very cold. I continued down the concrete steps, still slippery, across the park and into the old town. The narrow streets offered some protection from the weather, but I still walked quickly until I reached the river. Here the wind was pushing up from the sea and I braced myself before crossing one of the old stone bridges and jogged up the steep streets of the hill to my house. The front door key was in the pocket of my own coat and with whoever had it, so I let myself in through the back door with a spare key that we always kept under an old broken birdhouse next to the door. I walked through the rooms on the ground floor, keeping the coat on and rubbing my shoulders, up the stairs to the second floor and over to my desk by the window. Our house, my house, that had been my home for most of my childhood and where I now lived alone, was built on the highest point in town. I looked out. The town twinkled below me. In the sky, clouds raced past, lit by a half moon. Really was a great view.